The auction yard smelled of dust and sweat, where men with rifles leaned lazily against wooden posts. A young Apache girl, no more than 20, stood barefoot on the block. Her wrists were tied, her braids frayed, her face streaked with dust and tears. Traders barked bids like wolves circling prey. One shouted her worth in horses, another in silver. She kept her eyes low until, trembling, they lifted and met a young cowboy's gaze. Ethan Carter stood near the fence, his jaw tight, his eyes troubled. For a heartbeat, silence cut through the noise, and her lips trembled with desperation. The girl's voice cracked, not loud, but sharp enough to pierce through the jeers. "Please," she whispered, her throat dry, "I don't want to belong to them. Let me belong to you instead." The men around her roared with laughter, spitting tobacco and slapping their knees at her plea. "Hear that, boy? She's begging you," one rancher sneered, flashing a gold tooth. Ethan shifted in his boots, the heat of every mocking eye pressing down on him. Inside, his heart waged war between fear of ridicule and the raw ache of compassion stirring deep in his chest. The auctioneer banged his gavel against the wooden block, voice sharp as a whip. "2 silver bars, 3 horses. Do I hear more?" His words danced above the cruel laughter, each number a reminder of how cheaply human dignity was traded in this corner of the West. Ethan clenched his fists. He was a simple ranch hand with little more than his name and a tired horse to claim. He had come into town for supplies, not to gamble his future. Yet the girl's eyes held him, dark, desperate, and begging for something no money could measure. The trader nearest her yanked at her bound arm, pulling her forward so the crowd could gawk. "Strong enough to work a field, clean a house, cook a pot of beans," he boasted, smirking at the bidders. The girl winced at his grip, but her gaze never left Ethan. In that moment, the noise around him dimmed. He remembered his mother's words before she died. "No soul is meant for chains, Ethan. Not ever." The young cowboy swallowed hard, torn, between walking away to keep his pride intact or stepping forward to face the fire of scorn. His boots rooted in the dust. Another bid rang out, louder, sharper. 4 horses and a rifle. A man in a black coat raised his hand, eyes cold as iron. The crowd murmured in approval, nodding at the offer. The girl's shoulders shook, and for the first time her face broke into tears that streaked down her cheeks like rivers through dust. Ethan's chest tightened, as if a rope had been thrown around his own heart. He could feel the law of the frontier demanding silence, demanding indifference, but his father's voice echoed faintly. "A man's worth ain't in what he owns, but what he protects." Ethan's decision burned clear. Slowly, Ethan stepped out from the fence, his spurs clinking against the wooden floorboards of the platform. The jeers started instantly, like rattlesnakes striking. "The ranch pup thinks he's got teeth," one man shouted, earning a chorus of laughter. Ethan's voice, though quiet, carried a steel edge. "I'll take her," he said, pulling from his pocket a single gold coin, the last of his savings from months of breaking horses and hauling feed. He tossed it into the dust at the auctioneer's boots. Silence fell, heavy, shocked. Men spat, cursed, mocked, but Ethan's eyes never wavered from the girl, who froze, trembling in disbelief. The auctioneer squinted at the coin, lips curling in contempt. "That's no fair trade, boy," he snapped. "This is a business, not a church." Offering. The crowd roared again, some demanding the sale continue, others egging Ethan on to embarrass himself further. Ethan's hand went to the revolver at his hip, not drawing it, but letting the threat hang like smoke in the air. His jaw hardened. "You'll take it," he said, his voice cold and unshaking, "because it's worth more than your rotten souls will ever be." The words cut sharp, and for the first time silence cracked the crowd's arrogance. The trader holding the girl hesitated, eyeing Ethan's stance. He muttered curses under his breath, but finally shoved the girl forward. She stumbled, nearly falling, before Ethan caught her by the arms. Her body was trembling, light as a bird in his hands. She lifted her tear-streaked face to him, lips parted as though searching for words. Ethan glanced at her briefly, then turned to the crowd. "She walks free with me," he declared, voice steady as the prairie wind. Murmurs followed him like shadows as he led her away, the rope around her wrists still cutting deep into her skin. As they stepped out of the yard, the weight of 100 eyes burned into Ethan's back. Men muttered threats, women whispered behind fans. Children stared wide-eyed at the scandal unfolding. But Ethan didn't falter. His horse waited tied at the hitching post, stamping impatiently. He untied it with one hand, while gently steadying the girl with the other. She was silent, her breath quick and shallow. He mounted, then reached down, pulling her up behind him. Her small hands clung to his waist, and he felt her heart hammering against his back. The town's noise faded as hooves struck dirt. The prairie stretched before them, endless, wild, unforgiving. Ethan rode hard until the town shrank into nothing but a smear of smoke on the horizon. The wind tore at his hat. The sun beat down on his shoulders, and still he pressed forward. The girl clung silently, her cheek pressed against his back, as though afraid this moment might vanish if she let go. Finally, when they slowed near a ridge where the land dipped into quiet, Ethan dismounted. He turned to her, untying the rope that bound her wrists. The marks were raw, red, painful. His voice softened. "You're free now." The girl lifted her hands, staring at the angry marks, then at him. Her lips trembled, and tears welled again, not of despair, but of something else, something heavier. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking against the silence. Ethan looked at her, his chest tightening under the weight of her gaze. For a long moment, the only sound was the prairie, wind stirring the grass. Then he answered, his words low but certain, "Because no soul deserves chains." Her breath caught, and her tears slipped down like rain, not from fear, but from the shocking taste of freedom that had finally come. Ethan's voice cut through the haze of the auction yard like a whip crack. His words didn't just silence the crowd, they branded themselves into the air. "I'll take her." Gasps rolled among the traders, ranchers, and drifters. One man spat, "Boy, you just bought yourself a curse." Another muttered about wasted gold, but Ethan didn't flinch. He bent low, untied her trembling wrists, and guided her past the jeering crowd. For the first time, her eyes lifted with something fragile, hope. The law of men had called her property, but Ethan had called her free. The night. Air carried them away from the auction block, across the open prairie. Ethan rode steady, the girl still unnamed to him, clinging to the saddle, her head pressed against his back. The moon painted silver streaks across the endless land. Ethan could feel her heartbeat against him, wild and desperate, like a bird just released from a cage. His gold was gone, but he didn't care. Freedom was worth more. When they stopped, he built a fire, his hands steady, though his heart raced in ways he couldn't explain. The girl sat close to the flames, the glow softening the streaks of dirt on her face. She stared at her hands, still marked from the ropes, then whispered, "Why did you do it?" Ethan swallowed, searching for words. "Because no one deserves to be sold." She blinked, stunned by his simple truth. Then with trembling fingers, she pulled out a small pouch hidden in her braid. A single bead necklace, all she owned. She placed it before him. "Then take this. It is all of me." Ethan stared at the necklace, the beads catching the firelight, colors reflecting like tiny flames. He shook his head gently. "Keep it. Your life isn't mine to take. It's yours to live." For the first time she smiled faintly, though tears glistened in her eyes. She leaned forward, speaking in broken English. "Then I live with you." Ethan felt his chest tighten. The prairie wind howled, carrying with it the voices of the Wild West, but in that circle of fire, The world was suddenly quiet. Morning came with the cry of meadowlarks. The girl rose before Ethan, grinding corn. She had gathered, her hands moving with quiet purpose. Ethan watched, unsure whether to speak, until she finally met his eyes. "My name is Ayana," she said softly. The sound of it was like music, flowing with pride and sorrow. "It means eternal blossom." Ethan repeated it under his breath, tasting the weight of it. Ayana, no longer just the trembling girl from the auction. She was someone whole, someone real. Days passed as they rode together across the plains. Ayana stitched Ethan's torn shirt with thread she carried, hidden in her dress, humming a tune from her people. She rode bareback beside him, hair flying like the prairie grass in the wind. She laughed quietly when his horse bucked. The sound, like water over stones. At night, she cooked simple meals from what they found: roots, corn, dried venison. Ethan found himself watching her more than he wanted to admit. She wasn't just surviving. She was teaching him how to live, but the town was less kind. When Ethan led her into the trading post, silence fell heavy. Men shifted, their eyes filled with disdain. One muttered, "Savage." Another sneered, "She belongs back where she came from." Even the preacher refused to look at her. Ethan's fists tightened, but Ayana touched his arm gently, her eyes steady. "Let them talk," she whispered. "We know the truth." Ethan realized then that her courage was sharper than any blade. She had been broken by chains, but not destroyed. She was stronger than them all. One evening, beneath a sky burning red with sunset, Ayana knelt by the fire. Her hands were steady as she stirred the pot, but her eyes were distant. "Ethan," she said softly, "I was not given. I choose." He froze, the weight of her words pressing deep. She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "You freed me with gold, but I give you me with love." Ethan felt something shift inside him, greater than fear, greater than the West itself. He reached for her hand, rough and scarred, and held it as though it was the rarest treasure. Seasons turned. The prairie grasses grew tall, then bent beneath the snow. Ayana remained by his side, mending clothes, taming horses, planting small crops in the spring. Together, they worked the land. And though whispers in town never ceased, Ethan no longer cared. He had found a truth far greater than approval. At night, when the fire crackled low, Ayana would rest her head against his shoulder, her voice carrying the stories of her people, stories of stars, rivers, and freedom. Ethan listened, realizing he had not just saved her. She had saved him, too. By spring, the town could no longer deny what they saw. Ethan and Ayana were not bound by bargain or pity, but by something fierce and undeniable. Some still spat at their backs, but others began to soften. Ayana carried herself with quiet strength, her eyes unbroken, her smile radiant with fire. One morning, she walked beside Ethan through the dusty street, their hands clasped. She looked at him with a smile that lit the West itself. "You gave me freedom," she whispered, "but I gave you forever." Ethan knew then, love had made him richer than gold.